Just telling stories with microphones, just telling stories around campfires. Maybe I'll move around a little bit, it'll be more natural. A long time ago, far away across the ocean, in Poland, there was a small town called Tarnów. Tarnów was an unusual town, halfway between Krakow and Warsaw. It was unusual because it was a Jewish town surrounded by a non-Jewish town. And usually that was okay. I mean, the relationships between the Jews in Tarnów and the non-Jews often were good, but sometimes were not. And a time did come to be where an official in the city wasn't happy to have the center of his city be a Jewish shtetl, a Jewish village. And he was a powerful person. He was the advisor to the mayor. He was the sheriff. And he went to the mayor and he said, you know, I'd like these Jews to move away. I'd like to get rid of these Jews who are living in the middle of our town. And I think I've devised a way to discredit them, to close their synagogue, and then be rid of them. So, you know, Jews celebrate their Sabbath starting on Friday evening. Our holidays all start at sundown. And that Friday evening, since Tarnów, the shtetl, the Jewish village, was so small, all of the Jews were in the one synagogue right in the center of Tarnów. The rabbi came in, stepped up to the bima, that's the raised lectern at the front, ready to begin the Shabbat service, when all of a sudden the big wooden doors at the front of the synagogue opened, and in walked the sheriff in his uniform, and even with medals. And he walked right down the center aisle, just like here, right up to the bima, as if he owned the place. He looked the rabbi in the eye, and it was very quiet in the congregation. He looked the rabbi in the eye and he said, "You're a liar. You're a fraud." It was as quiet there as it is here. You heard an occasional, nobody spoke that way to the rabbi. The sheriff said, "You're a liar and you're a fraud, and I'm going to prove that. And we don't want to have a hypocritical rabbi running a synagogue in the center of our town. So I'll ask you a few questions. And if you can answer the questions correctly, so be it. And if not, we're going to put a big lock on that door, and this synagogue will be closed." He said to the rabbi, "Isn't it true that you Jews believe that God is all-powerful?" The rabbi said, "Yes." The sheriff said, "Isn't it also true that you Jews believe that God is invisible?" The rabbi said, "Yes." "So here's the question," the sheriff said. "If God is all-powerful, and if God is invisible, how does God see God's self?" You know, if God's invisible, it can't be seen. But if God's all-powerful, he could make God's self be seen, but then God wouldn't be invisible. It's a paradox, it's a puzzle, it's impossible. With that, the sheriff marched down the center of the aisle, and he was gone. Before he left, he said, "I'll be back next Friday night for your answer. And if you don't have an answer, the lock will go on the door." Well, there's a whole hubbub in the congregation. It's talking, it wasn't terrible. And the rabbi said, "No, let's just settle down. Let's have our Sabbath, our Shabbat. And let me think about this, and we'll see how it goes." So they did that. After the Sabbath was over, the rabbi thought about the questions, realized that it's impossible to answer the questions. Two opposite things, I mean, it's impossible. But he said there must be an answer. I'll study. I'll read our Holy Torah, the 5 books of Moses. I'll read our scriptures. I'll look at our prayer book. I'll look at all of the holy writings that I can and see if I can't find an answer to this paradox. No answers came. I'll look at the law books, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the books that were written in the Middle Ages, the Shulchan Aruch that explains how all of our traditions are done and how they came to be. He did that, and no answers came to him. He said, I'll bring all of the scholars together. We'll sit and we'll discuss. We'll learn from each other, and out of that discussion will come to the answer. How does God see God's self? And he did. And he didn't. No answers came from the scholars. All this took time. The week was quickly going by. As Friday approached, the rabbi was very frustrated and very frightened. He said, I've studied and I've discussed and I've come to no conclusion. Perhaps I should pray. Maybe divine guidance will help me. So he left the city. He left the town of Tarnoff, went out into the woods. It was a beautiful day like today. The sun was shining. It was lovely. He sat in the woods. He prayed to God. He listened to the birds, the bees. He heard the leaves rustling in the wind. All day he sat. All day he meditated. No answers to the questions came to him. And so very dejected, he got up to go back to Tarnoff to confront the sheriff as Shabbat would begin that Friday evening. On his way back, he's walking down the road. He sees by the side of the road a log, and sitting on the log is a little boy. So for some strange reason, he sat down next to the boy. And the little boy said to him, "You look very disturbed. You look very sad. Why?" The rabbi said, "I've got these questions I can't answer. Somebody asked me, isn't God all-powerful and isn't God invisible?" And I said, yes. And then he said, well, then how does God see God's self? The little boy said, I've had questions about God too. The little boy proceeded to tell him a story. And when he was done, the rabbi got up and walked back to the city. In the congregation, every seat was filled. There wasn't a Jew in Tarnoff that didn't want to see what the rabbi was going to say to the sheriff that Friday night. They were all afraid, but they certainly were going to be there. And sure enough, just before the service started, the big doors opened. In marched the sheriff in his beautiful uniform with medals, right up onto the bima, looked the rabbi in the face and said, "I asked you last week, is God all-powerful? And you said yes. I asked you last week, is God invisible? And you said yes. Then I asked you, so how does God see God's self?" The rabbi said, "Sir, I've had the worst week of my life. I studied everything I could think of. I read every book I could read. I brought together every scholar in the area to talk about this, to no avail. I went out into the woods. I prayed on this. No answers came to me. But then I met a little boy on the side of the road. And I sat down on that log and I told him my problems. And this is what he said to me. He said, I was thinking about God too a lot. And I didn't understand how God could be so powerful and God could be invisible. So I went to my father and I said, how does God see God's self? And my dad, my father, took me in the house, took me into the bedroom, opened up his closet door, and on the inside of the door was a full-length mirror. He placed me in front of the mirror and he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see me." He said, "No. You see your reflection, because you see, we're God's mirror. And God sees God's self through us, through our reflection, and all the good and blessings that we bring into the world." And that was his answer. And the sheriff turned and walked out. Well, they say that Friday night in Tarnoff, in that little shtetl, in that little synagogue in the center of that city, the Sabbath wine tasted sweeter than it ever had before. Thank you.